Rain poured over the quiet colony town, turning the dusty roads into rivers of mud. Mason walked alone through the storm, his coat soaked, his boots heavy with dirt. He had just finished repairing a power line outside the settlement. The day had been long, and all he wanted was a warm meal and rest. The wind howled through the metal roofs, and the flickering lights of the town barely pushed back the darkness. Then, through the noise of the rain, Mason heard something, a faint sound, like soft crying. He stopped and listened. It wasn't a machine or an animal. It was the sound of children. For a moment he thought he imagined it, but then he heard it again. 3 small voices crying weakly, mixed with fear. Curiosity and worry filled him. He turned his flashlight toward the old storage building near the edge of town. It had been abandoned for years, half broken by storms. He pushed the door open. The rusty hinges creaked loudly. Inside it was dark and cold, the smell of wet metal and dust thick in the air. His flashlight beam moved slowly until it caught something. 3 small figures huddled in a corner. His breath caught in his throat. They were not human. Their skin shimmered faintly blue, glowing under the rainlight. Their eyes were large and full of fear. One of them was holding the other, who looked too weak to move. The smallest one covered their face, shaking. Mason froze. He had seen aliens before, traders, workers, scientists, but these were children, and they looked terrified. "It's okay," Mason said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I won't hurt you." They didn't answer, just stared at him. Their clothes were torn, their feet bare. He noticed something that broke his heart. One of them was holding a small object, a round metal piece glowing faintly. It looked like a child's toy. Mason took a deep breath and reached into his bag. He pulled out his last food ration, a protein bar and a can of soup. He placed them gently on the ground and backed away. The oldest alien child looked at him unsure. After a long pause, they crawled forward, sniffed the food, and slowly handed it to the others. They ate carefully, like they had forgotten how. Mason watched in silence, feeling something warm and heavy in his chest. "Where are your parents?" he asked quietly. The oldest child looked up at him. Their voice was soft, broken by exhaustion. "Mother, lost, we ran. Bad ones came." Mason didn't understand everything, but the sadness in those words hit him hard. He looked outside. The rain hadn't stopped, and the night was getting colder. Leaving them here wasn't an option. "Come with me," he said gently. "I have a workshop nearby. You'll be safe there." They didn't move at first, but when thunder roared above, the youngest screamed and hid behind Mason's leg. That was enough. He smiled softly and led them out into the storm. He covered them with his coat as best he could. They were small, barely reaching his waist. The rain soaked them quickly, but Mason walked fast, keeping his body between them and the wind. When they reached his workshop, he helped them inside. The warm light from his power lamp filled the small space. Tools, spare metal, and a half-fixed generator covered the tables. The children looked around, confused but curious. Mason handed them dry blankets and started the heater. He opened the can of soup and poured it into 3 small cups. The smell filled the air, and the children's eyes brightened for the first time. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "No one will hurt you." The oldest nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Human," Mason smiled. "Name's Mason, and you?" They hesitated. "Lyra," the oldest said. "My brothers, Tin and Rollo." "Well, Lyra, Tin, and Rollo," Mason said softly. "You're safe now." The youngest yawned and leaned against his arm, already half asleep. Mason watched them, wondering who they were and where they came from. Outside, thunder rolled again, and far in the sky he thought he saw strange lights, ships moving through the clouds. For a moment, a cold feeling ran through him. Whoever these children were, someone powerful might be looking for them. He looked back at the sleeping aliens, their soft blue glow lighting the workshop like gentle stars. Mason didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't turn his back on them. Not now. He sighed, grabbed his old rifle, and checked the lock on the door. The rain kept falling, steady and endless, as the human engineer sat beside 3 alien children who had just changed his quiet life forever. The storm raged through the night, but inside Mason's small workshop, warmth and safety returned. The metal walls groaned as the wind pushed against them, yet the old heater hummed softly, spreading gentle heat. The 3 alien children sat close to the fire, wrapped in blankets too big for them. Their glowing skin flickered with the rhythm of the heater light, blue, then pale, then soft again, like living stars trapped in small bodies. Mason stirred a pot of soup on the stove. The smell filled the air, mixing with the scent of oil and rain. He watched the children silently, still unsure what he had stepped into. Lyra, the eldest, sat straight and alert, her eyes never leaving him. The middle one, Tin, tried to play with a broken wrench, while the youngest, Rollo, had fallen asleep on the floor beside Mason's old toolbox. "You're safe here," Mason said softly, serving the soup into metal bowls. "No one will find you." Lyra hesitated before taking the bowl. She sniffed at first, then took a small sip. The warmth seemed to surprise her. "Human food," she said quietly. "Warm," Mason smiled. "Yeah, it's not fancy, but it'll fill your belly." Tin giggled when he tasted his share, his small teeth flashing. "Spicy," he said in a voice like wind chimes. Mason chuckled. He hadn't laughed like that in a long time. As the rain softened, Mason turned to his workbench. He picked up the strange metal sphere the children carried. It wasn't a toy. It hummed softly in his hand, glowing with symbols he didn't recognize. He turned it over, curious, careful not to break it. The symbols shimmered like water when light touched them. "What is this?" he asked, looking at Lyra. Her expression changed. "It's ours. From home." "Where's home?" Mason asked. She looked down at her bowl. "Far, too far." Mason nodded slowly. He didn't press further. He just set the sphere back down beside her. "It's safe here too," he said. Hours passed. The storm outside eased into light drizzle. Mason repaired a broken panel near the door while the children huddled together, whispering in their soft, melodic language. He caught bits of it, words like mother, sky, and guards. Then suddenly a light blinked on the strange sphere. A faint pulse echoed through the room. Mason frowned. "Hey, what's that?" Lyra gasped and grabbed it quickly, pressing her small fingers over the surface. "It's waking!" she cried. The hum grew louder, and a holographic image appeared. A map filled with stars. Mason stepped closer. "What is that?" "It's the way home," Lyra whispered. "But we can't go. They'll find us. Who will?" Mason asked again. She looked at him, eyes wide and filled with fear. "The hunters." Before he could say anything, a deep sound rolled across the night, distant but powerful. It wasn't thunder. It was something else, mechanical, heavy, alive. Mason rushed to the window. Far in the sky, several lights moved in a line. Ships. Searchlights cut through the clouds. His heart pounded. "Those the hunters?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "They search for us. Mother's enemies. They want to take us away." Mason felt his chest tighten. "Then we better make sure they don't." He turned off the lights, pulled the curtains down, and grabbed his toolkit. The engineer in him woke up. Quickly, he started placing old metal sheets around the windows, blocking any thermal scans. He rewired the power grid to run silently on his backup batteries. Lyra watched in awe. "You're helping us?" she asked quietly. He didn't look up. "I don't care who's chasing you. No one deserves to be hunted, especially kids." For the first time, she smiled. "You are strange, human." Mason grinned. "I get that a lot." By midnight, the workshop was dark and quiet. Only the soft hum of the heater and the gentle breathing of the children filled the air. Mason sat by the window, holding his old rifle across his knees, watching the faint glow of alien ships passing in the distance. As one spotlight swept near his roof, Mason held his breath. The ships hovered for a moment, then moved away. When silence returned, he exhaled slowly. He looked at the sleeping children, Lyra's arm around her brother's, the strange sphere glowing faintly beside them. He couldn't shake the thought that their story was far bigger than he could imagine. He whispered to himself, "What did I just get myself into?" Outside, the night hid its secrets, but above the clouds someone else had already seen the signal. A message pulsed across the stars. The royal heirs are alive. And far away on a ship larger than mountains, the most powerful woman in the galaxy opened her eyes. Morning came with a heavy silence that felt unnatural. The storm had ended, but the sky remained dark gray and the air buzzed with strange energy. Mason stepped outside his workshop and looked toward the horizon. There, faint black dots gliding across the clouds. Ships, military grade. He knew it instantly. He had repaired enough scanners and comm towers in his life to recognize a fleet on patrol. He went back inside quickly. The alien children were still asleep, huddled under blankets. Their faint blue glow made them look peaceful, innocent, nothing like fugitives. Mason crouched beside the heater and whispered, "Wake up, kids. We might have visitors." Lyra blinked awake first. Her small eyes widened when she saw Mason's tense face. "They found us?" she whispered. "I think so," he said quietly. "Stay quiet. Don't move unless I say so." He pulled down the metal shutters and turned off the power system. The workshop sank into dim orange light. The generator's hum faded, leaving only the sound of distant engines in the sky. Then thud, the ground shook slightly. A ship had landed nearby. Mason's pulse quickened. He looked through a crack in the window. 5 armored figures stepped out of the mist. Their armor shimmered like liquid metal and their helmets glowed red. Each carried a plasma weapon. These weren't scavengers or mercenaries, they were elite soldiers. One of them raised a scanner. A blue light spread across the buildings. Mason ducked back, heart hammering. "They're scanning for life," he muttered. "Stay down." Tin whimpered softly and Mason quickly put a finger to his lips. "Shh, don't make a sound." Footsteps echoed outside. A metallic voice spoke, cold and commanding. "Human settlement detected. Traces of alien biomatter in this zone. Search every structure." Mason cursed under his breath. He needed to buy time. He quietly opened a small maintenance hatch under the workbench. "Get in here," he told the children. "Quick." They crawled inside, squeezing close together. Mason covered the opening with a heavy panel and slid a box of old tools on top. Then he grabbed a rag, wiped his hands, and forced himself to breathe calmly. Seconds later, the door burst open. The soldiers entered, weapons raised. "Human," one said sharply, his voice distorted by the helmet. "Identify yourself." Mason stood straight, acting annoyed. "Mason Reed, engineer, you just broke my door." The soldier scanned him from head to toe. "We are searching for alien fugitives. 3 juveniles. Have you seen anything unusual?" Mason forced a scoff. "Only your kind landing uninvited on private property. I've been fixing power lines all week. Haven't seen anyone." The soldier walked around, eyes scanning the messy workshop. Another knelt near the heater, touching the floor. The faintest glow of blue residue flickered under the soldier's glove. Alien energy traces. Mason's heart nearly stopped. "Old circuit burns," he said quickly. "Last week's job." The soldier hesitated, then stood up. "You live alone?" "Yeah," Mason replied. "No one wants to share a house with a man who smells like engine oil." For a moment it seemed they might believe him. But then one of the soldiers spotted something, a small blanket corner peeking out from behind the crates. "Wait," the soldier said, stepping closer. Mason moved fast. He grabbed a nearby wrench and knocked over a tray of tools. The loud crash echoed through the workshop, startling them. "Careful where you step," he shouted. "That's live equipment." The soldiers paused. Sparks jumped from a power coil Mason had purposely left active. The noise and light threw off their scanners. After a tense moment, their leader said, "Search complete. No confirmed targets." Mason kept his expression steady as they turned to leave. Before the last one stepped out, he turned his helmet slightly, voice cold. "If we find out you're lying, human, your world will burn." Mason didn't answer. He just watched them march back into the mist. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. He waited until their footsteps faded before moving. He pushed the toolbox aside and lifted the hatch. The children crawled out, trembling. Tin's eyes were wet. Rollo clung to Mason's leg. "It's okay," Mason whispered. "They're gone. For now." Lyra looked up at him, her face pale with fear. "You risked your life," she said softly. "They would have killed you," Mason shrugged. "Maybe, but I wasn't about to hand you over." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're not like the others," she said finally. He smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Outside, the soldiers regrouped near their ship. One remained behind, though, hidden among the rocks, watching through his helmet's visor. He had noticed something. The heat signature near the workshop had briefly spiked, 3 small shapes. He spoke quietly into his communicator. "Target confirmed. Report to Her Majesty." As the ship rose into the gray sky, Mason sat beside the window, unaware that his simple kindness had just been recorded, and that somewhere high above the clouds, the Empress herself was watching the human who dared protect her children. The next sunrise came painted in gold and fire, but it brought no warmth. The sky above the colony trembled as something massive entered orbit. Mason looked up from his workshop yard and felt the ground shiver beneath his boots. The hum wasn't from any ship he knew. It was deeper, heavier, like the air itself was afraid. He shielded his eyes as a shadow crossed the sun. It wasn't a cloud. It was a ship so large it blotted out daylight, black and silver, shaped like the wings of some ancient beast. The alien children froze. Lyra clutched her brothers and whispered one word in her language. Mother. Mason's breath caught. That's your mother? Lyra nodded slowly, eyes wide. The Empress has come. The words felt unreal. Mason had heard rumors about the Xyran Empress, a being said to command whole fleets, a woman feared across dozens of systems. Entire governments bent their knees when she spoke. And now, she was here, above his small workshop. A beam of light descended from the ship and touched the ground outside. The rain-steamed air hissed as metal melted into glass where it landed. Then from that light she appeared, the Empress of Xyra. She was tall, regal, and terrifyingly calm. Her armor shimmered with shifting colors, alive with power. Her eyes glowed a soft violet, and her long black hair floated slightly as if gravity itself respected her. Every step she took made the ground hum with energy. Behind her, dozens of soldiers bowed low, their weapons pointed down. Mason stood at the door of his workshop, his rifle hanging by his side. He wasn't a soldier, just an engineer, but something in him refused to kneel. The Empress stopped a few feet away. You are the human, she said, her voice echoing like music and thunder at once. The one who shelters what belongs to me. Mason swallowed hard. I didn't shelter property, he said quietly. I helped children. At that, the soldiers lifted their heads in alarm. No one spoke to her that way. But Serath, the Empress, only studied him, her expression unreadable. Step aside, she commanded. You will not be harmed if you return what is mine. Mason didn't move. They're scared, he said. They were starving. I fed them. They're safe here. A murmur rippled through the guards. The Empress's gaze hardened. Do you know who I am? I'm guessing you're the reason the sky looks like it's about to collapse, Mason said. And I'm guessing you're their mother. Silence. Then slowly, Serath's eyes softened. She turned her head slightly, and behind Mason, Lyra stepped out, her brothers clinging to her sides. Mother? Lyra whispered. For a brief moment, the cold Empress vanished, replaced by a mother's trembling smile. She dropped to her knees, her armor cracking faintly as she opened her arms. The children ran into her embrace, tears streaming down their glowing cheeks. My stars, Serath whispered, voice breaking for the first time. You're safe. Mason looked away, feeling something tight in his chest. But then the soldiers aimed their weapons at him. He took them, one growled. He must be punished for touching the royal heirs. Serath raised a hand, stopping them instantly. She rose slowly, holding her children close. He did not take them, she said, her tone low and cold. He saved them. The guards froze, confused. Serath looked at Mason again. You fed them, she said. You sheltered them. No human has ever done such a thing for my kind. Mason shrugged. Didn't think about species. Just saw hungry kids. Her lips curved faintly, a rare, almost human smile. You speak with no fear, she said softly. Do you know what that means in my empire? I guess it means I'm either brave or stupid, Mason said with a dry chuckle. The Empress stepped closer until she stood only inches away. The air around her shimmered with quiet power, but she didn't strike. Instead, she said, it means, you are free. Her words carried strange weight. The soldiers looked stunned. No outsider was ever declared free in the presence of the Empress. She turned to her guard captain. Prepare transport for my children. Leave the human unharmed. Then she faced Mason one last time. Your kindness has been seen, she said. You will be remembered. Mason nodded slowly. That's all I need. As she and her children vanished in a beam of light, the dark ship rose back into the heavens. The clouds cracked open behind it, leaving golden light pouring across the land. Mason stood there alone, rain dripping from the roof, wondering if any of it had been real. But in the mud near his boots, a small glowing fragment remained, one piece of the Empress's armor. It pulsed softly as if alive. He picked it up and whispered, Guess I just made one hell of a friend. Far above the planet, Serath watched him from her command deck. Strange human, she murmured. You fed my children, and you fed my heart. The next morning, Mason woke up to the low hum of engines outside his workshop. For a moment he thought the storm had returned, but when he stepped outside he froze. The ground glowed with alien markings and a golden barrier shimmered in the air around his home. He was surrounded. Dozens of alien soldiers stood in a perfect circle, their weapons lowered but ready. And in the middle of them, descending from the sky in a silver transport, stood the Empress herself, tall and calm, her expression unreadable. Her eyes locked on Mason. "Mason Reed," she said, her voice smooth but commanding. "You will come with me." He wanted to argue, but one look at her face told him this wasn't a request. He sighed, grabbed his jacket, and said, "You could have just knocked." The soldiers didn't smile, but Sarath did. Barely. Humor, even now. She nodded, and 2 guards escorted him toward the ship. Inside, the air was thick with energy. The walls shimmered with strange lights that pulsed like living veins. Mason had never been inside alien royalty's vessel before. It felt like walking inside a heartbeat. Every surface seemed to breathe. They entered a grand hall lined with glowing pillars. At the far end stood a massive display, floating holograms of entire star systems shifting in slow motion. In the center, the Empress sat on a raised platform, her children nearby still wrapped in soft robes. Lyra smiled when she saw Mason waving shyly. Mason nodded at her and then turned to Sarath. "You brought me here to yell at me?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "To understand you." That threw him off. "Understand me?" She gestured toward the hologram, which changed to show images, footage recorded from her soldiers' armor cams. Mason saw himself carrying the alien children through the rain, feeding them, fixing their glowing sphere. He felt his throat tighten. They had watched everything. Sarath spoke again, her voice lower now. "When I received reports of a human hiding my heirs, I was ready to destroy your colony. I thought you had taken them to ransom me." Mason swallowed. "Not my style." She stood, her armor gleaming. "And yet instead of running or selling them, you shared your food. You risked your life against my soldiers. Why?" Mason hesitated, looking down at his rough, grease-stained hands. "Because they were just kids, scared, hungry. Doesn't matter what planet they're from, hunger's the same everywhere." Sarath stared at him for a long moment, and something flickered in her eyes, a mix of surprise and pain. She slowly removed one of her gauntlets, revealing a hand that looked almost human but faintly glowed beneath the skin. "Where I come from," she said quietly, "no one helps without reason. Kindness is seen as weakness, yet you gave without asking anything." Mason met her gaze. "Maybe you've just been around the wrong kind of people." That made her pause. The children giggled softly at his boldness, but the Empress didn't punish him. Instead, she walked closer until she stood only a few feet away. "You risked your life for strangers," she said. "You defied soldiers, and when you faced me, you did not kneel. Do you understand what that means in my empire?" He smirked faintly. "That I'm an idiot?" For the first time, Sarath laughed. It was soft, but it echoed like music through the ship. Even her guards looked startled. "Perhaps," she said, "but a brave one." She turned to her children. "Do you see my stars? This is why he lives. Mercy has power." Lyra stepped forward and placed her small hand on Mason's arm. "Mother, can he stay with us?" The question caught him off guard. "Whoa, hey," he began, but Sarath silenced him with a raised hand. "His place is with his people," she said gently. "But his name will be remembered." She gestured toward the display again. It shifted once more, showing images of Earth, old and cracked yet beautiful. "Your species has done much harm," she said softly, "but also great good. I judged you too quickly. You reminded me that strength without heart is emptiness." Mason scratched his neck, unsure what to say. "Glad I could help with your cosmic philosophy." The Empress smiled again. "You helped more than you know." She motioned to one of her aides, who carried a silver cube, and handed it to Mason. It pulsed faintly with energy. "What's this?" he asked. "A seed," Sarath said. "It will grow on your world. It will clean your air and feed your people. A gift from one parent to another." He stared at the cube in his hands, feeling its gentle warmth. "You didn't have to—" "I did," she interrupted. "You fed my children when I could not. You reminded me that even a queen can learn from a mechanic." As Mason stood there in silence, the great hall shimmered with light. The Empress bowed her head slightly, a gesture of deep respect among her kind. Her soldiers, seeing this, lowered themselves instantly. Mason blinked. "Wait, what's happening?" Sarath's voice was steady but warm. A human showed the Empress of Xyra what kindness means. The galaxy will know your name. The lights around him brightened, and Mason realized something profound. His simple act of feeding 3 frightened children had rewritten the story of an empire. As he was escorted back to his world, the Empress watched him go, her children waving from the viewport. "Farewell, human," she whispered. "May your heart stay strong, for in it I saw peace." The transport ship glided down silently over the valley, its engines whispering like wind. Mason stood at the edge of the landing platform, holding the silver cube the Empress had given him. The weight of it wasn't physical, it was something deeper, something he couldn't name. He had returned home for only a few days before Sarath's messenger came again. "The Empress requests your presence," the soldier had said, and now here he was, back aboard the flagship of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. Mason didn't know what to expect. Maybe gratitude, maybe punishment. He wasn't sure anymore. The door ahead opened, revealing Sarath's private chamber. It wasn't what he imagined. There were no golden thrones or jeweled guards, just a quiet room surrounded by starlight. The walls were transparent, showing endless space beyond, filled with shimmering nebulae and distant suns. Sarath stood there facing the stars, her reflection glowing faintly against the glass. "You came," she said without turning. "You did ask nicely," Mason replied, his tone light but cautious. Sarath smiled faintly. "You still speak without fear. I find that refreshing." She turned, her eyes studying him closely. "But words are easy, human. I must know if your heart is as strong as your tongue." Mason frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She stepped closer, her armor flowing like liquid metal around her body. "In my empire," she said, "loyalty is proven, not spoken. You helped my children, but would you still stand for what's right if your life truly hung in the balance?" Mason crossed his arms. "I already did. Yes," she said softly. "But this time I will see it with my own eyes." Before he could answer, the floor beneath them shifted. The room darkened, the stars vanished, and suddenly Mason was standing in a wide arena, metal walls stretching high, humming with power. The air shimmered with energy fields. Across from him stood a single figure, a towering alien warrior clad in dark armor holding a spear that crackled with plasma. "What is this?" Mason asked, gripping his wrench instinctively. "A test," Sarath said, her voice echoing from above. "Defend the innocent." From a side gate, a small form stumbled into the arena, a child no older than Rollo, terrified and crying. Mason's gut twisted. The warrior began to advance toward the child. Mason didn't think, he ran. He snatched up a fallen metal rod and stepped between the child and the armored figure. "Stay behind me," he told the kid, voice steady though his heart pounded. The warrior lunged. Mason barely dodged the first strike, the plasma spear slicing through the air where his head had been. The heat burned his cheek. He swung his makeshift weapon, hitting the warrior's arm. The clang echoed, but it barely did anything. "You're no soldier," the alien said mockingly. "Never said I was." Mason grunted, ducking another blow. "I'm a mechanic." The warrior struck again, and Mason grabbed a handful of sand, throwing it into his opponent's face. The warrior roared, momentarily blinded, and Mason used the chance to shove him back with all his strength. Sparks flew as the plasma weapon hit the ground. Mason snatched it, his hands burning from the heat, and pointed it toward the sky. "Back off," he said, his voice shaking. "No one hurts a kid while I'm breathing." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the entire room dissolved into light. The arena vanished, and Mason found himself back in the chamber, breathing hard, hands trembling. The spear was gone. The child was gone. Only Sarath remained. She stood silently, her eyes filled with something like pride. "You would fight an empire with your bare hands," she said quietly. "Even against me." Mason dropped to one knee, exhausted. "You set that up, didn't you?" She nodded once. "Yes, and you passed." The walls shifted, revealing the galaxy once more. "My people have always believed strength lies in fear," she said. "But you've shown me something greater, courage born of kindness." Mason managed a faint smile. "Guess it's just how we're wired." Sarath stepped closer. "Then humanity is rarer than I thought." She raised her hand, and her guards knelt behind her. "From this day, Mason Reed of Earth is a protector of the royal house of Xyra." He blinked. "Wait, what?" "It is a title of highest honor," she said. "Few among my kind deserve it. You human have earned it." The children entered then, running toward Mason. Lyra hugged him tightly. "I told Mother you were brave," she whispered. Mason looked up at the Empress. "So, does this mean we're even now?" Her smile deepened, rare and genuine. "Not even," she said softly. "Just beginning." Above them, the stars seemed to burn brighter, as if the galaxy itself had witnessed something sacred. The bond of a human heart that no empire could ever test or break. The stars above the colony world shimmered like cold diamonds as Mason stood on his porch, staring at the endless sky. Weeks had passed since he last saw the Empress and her children. Sometimes he wondered if it had all been a dream, if he had imagined the glowing eyes, the alien ship, and the laughter of children not born of Earth. But every time he turned his hand, the proof was there, the silver cube Sarath had given him, still pulsing softly like a heartbeat. He didn't know what it truly was, only that it held warmth even in the coldest night. The words she had spoken before he left her ship still echoed in his mind. "Kindness feeds more than hunger, human. You fed my children. Now let me feed your world." That morning, the cube began to change. It started with a soft hum, a vibration so faint it blended with the wind. Mason was repairing an old solar relay when he noticed it. The cube, sitting on his workbench, was glowing brighter than ever before. Lines of light crawled across its surface, forming strange alien symbols. Then it lifted off the table and hovered. "Okay," Mason muttered, stepping back. "That's new." The glow spread outward, forming a sphere of light around the cube. The air smelled like rain and electricity. A wave of energy rolled out from it, gentle but powerful. Mason's tools rattled. His lights flickered. Then the glow burst outward in a silent explosion, a ripple of blue sweeping across the valley. For a moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, the earth began to change. The dry, cracked soil around his workshop shimmered, and small green shoots pushed up from the ground. Dozens, then hundreds. Within minutes, the valley was alive with growing vines, flowers, and golden grass. The air turned warm, filled with a scent so clean it almost hurt to breathe. The entire horizon, once gray and lifeless, transformed into living color. Mason stared in disbelief. "Well," he whispered. "Guess she meant it." By sunset, word had spread across the colony. People came from miles away to see the miracle. Farmers knelt in the new fields, touching the glowing plants that seemed to hum with quiet life. Children laughed as the vines curled playfully around their ankles. The cube floated above the center of the field, spinning slowly like a small star. Governor Reed, no relation to Mason, arrived with a team of scientists. They took readings, scanned the ground, and whispered theories. "It's rewriting the soil composition," one said. "Purifying radiation traces, multiplying oxygen density." "It's terraforming," another breathed. Instantly, Mason stood apart from the crowd, quietly watching. He didn't want credit. He didn't want fame. But deep down he felt something greater than pride. It was peace. That night, when the last of the colonists left, Mason sat alone under the stars. The cube had dimmed now, resting in the grass, faintly pulsing. He reached out and touched it. Immediately, a familiar voice echoed in his mind, soft, melodic, unmistakable. Human. He froze. "Sarath? You have done well," the voice said gently. "The seed has taken root. It will spread through your world, heal what has been broken." He looked up at the sky, half smiling. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again." "You will, Mason Reed," she said. "For your kind is unpredictable and rare. You gave without reason, and now life will return to your people. The galaxy will remember you." Mason exhaled slowly. "Guess that makes us even, huh?" There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. Not even, grateful. The connection faded, and the cube settled into the soil, merging with the glowing plants. By dawn, the first human settlements across the planet began reporting the same thing. Crops growing faster, air becoming cleaner, rivers turning clear again. The world was healing. Mason didn't tell anyone what really happened. When people asked, he only said, "Just good luck, I guess." But sometimes when he looked up at the night sky, he saw it, a faint streak of silver among the stars, moving slowly across the heavens. He knew who it was, the Empress of Xyra, watching. And though the galaxy was vast and cruel, somewhere out there, a queen and her children remembered a human mechanic who had once shared his food with 3 lost kids in the rain. As the wind brushed the glowing fields, Mason smiled softly. Take care of them, Surath, he whispered. And don't forget, kindness is the strongest power there is. High above, unseen by human eyes, a royal fleet shimmered briefly before vanishing into the black, leaving behind a healed world, a quiet man, and a story that would echo through stars for generations to come.